Excellent. Welcome. You are at the Tuesday, May 10th general meeting of the Multnomah Neighborhood Association in Portland, Oregon. We are scheduled for a meeting from 7 o'clock to 8:30. And we have currently 47 people on the call. I do want to, so I call the meeting to order. So welcome and thank you. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of the previous minutes and the agenda. Now, I want to speak real quick to the previous minutes. Our secretary had to resign her position previously and we don't have a secretary, and we are a volunteer organization. So we felt that the best way to go about this is the actual word-for-word documentation from the videos from these Zoom calls. And so we do have those accessible if people want to be able to review those. It's just not in summary form. I will work towards getting those updated, and once we get a volunteer in to be secretary, we can stop using the video as our documentation. So that's the previous minutes. I hope everyone understands, and if anyone is interested in being a secretary, that'd be awesome. So that would leave the agenda. The agenda was available in the public folder. Is there any questions or comments or additions to the agenda or changes to the agenda? Okay, good. Hearing none, we'll go forward then. Let's have a quick overview of the meeting and how we're going to conduct this and the voting procedures. I really want to hit on the voting procedures here too when it comes to motions. I'm going to defer to, let's first start with the voting. Well, actually, no. Let me, oh, where's my notes? I am. I'm going to delegate this over to this first part over to Will while I find my notes real quick. So Will, can you please talk about the voting procedures and the credentialing?
Okay, sure. Hi. Okay, what we're doing this time as a more effective way of capturing a vote is we're using the polling process in Zoom to take a vote. And the polling is pretty simple. We put a screen up with the question before us. You give a check-off response to that question, one response per part of the question. Those are tabulated, yes, no, abstain, or whatever like that. At the same time, it records who has responded, so we can validate against the actual poll that was captured by Zoom without having to write things down or go back and double check and take a lot of time on it. You will have to be able to use part of your system that is not everybody has access to, so we'll check that out. If we try to have something happen and you can't do it for some technical reason, then we'll poll you manually, and we'll take the time to make sure that everyone who wasn't able to do it automatically will be recorded manually, okay? So it's a Zoom poll. The first thing we will vote on is what Moses would call credentialing, which means who's a member. Now, you are a member by a series of characteristics. You live in the Multnomah neighborhood, not necessarily in the village, but in the boundaries of Multnomah neighborhood. You own a business in Multnomah, or you own real property in Multnomah, or you have in fact asked to be a member and were officially approved to come in. Now, living doesn't mean owning property. You are a renter. If you're living in Multnomah, you qualify to be a member. So the first vote, when we're ready for it, will be to credential everyone who is a member, if you're not a member, to say you are, and that will be our beginning set of people who are qualified to vote. Okay? So that we won't do it right now. That's what we do. We use the polling process. As we do it, I'll go over it and we'll see how we go. I'd like us to try one thing just to start with, the simple process. I don't know how many people have been on Zoom before. It's getting more and more people, everyone is. But one thing that's important to be able to get recognized without talking out is to be able to raise your Zoom hand. Now, if to do that, there should be somewhere on your screen, usually at the bottom, an icon that says reactions. When you click on that, there should be an icon, a little hand that says raise hand. You click on that and it raises your hand. So everybody try that. Try raising your hand. Okay. Oh, look at us rating. Boy, we are doing it here. We got 28 people. Some people did a different one. There's a hand that has its up like the thumb out. That's the one to use. 38, 37, 36, 30. Keep going. Keep your hands up. Okay, we got going down here. We got a lot of people with hands raised. A lot of people with hands. Oh, somebody a little heart on there. I like that. Okay. Looks like everybody's raising their hand very well. Some that haven't yet. Kathy Henderson, Debbie Timmons, Ellen West, Jeff Parker. See what you got there. Okay. Keep coming. See what you got. Okay, there are several people that have not yet raised their hands, so give it a shot there. If you're on the telephone, you can't physically raise a hand, but if you hit a *6 on your phone, that raises it, and a *6 again lowers it. Now, there's some people that have not raised their hand there, but rather than wait for them to find them, there's somebody on the phone there. I recognize that, and I didn't raise my hand, so let me raise my hand here. Okay. So now to lower your hand, real simple. You go over to that reactions thing and you click on lower hand. So everybody lower your hand. Okay, we just about 1, 6, keep going. 3, 2, 1. We got 3 people with their hand, or 4 people with the hand still raised. 2 people with a hand raised. 1 person, and
It's on the phone.
now what happens with the 1 person is one of the reasons to raise your hand, it's on the phone there, I believe that's Beth, is
Two.
to hit the *6. But in any case, if they don't, I can take away all the reactions anyway, which I will do at this point so we can get everybody going here. Okay, clearing the feedback. So remember, when you raise your hand, that's to get attention. It does 2 things. It shows Moses that you want to talk, but you have to wait till he recognizes you. And it puts your name at the top of the list. Okay.
Oh, no, I muted.
So that's how we're all set with raising hands. We talked about the polling process to qualify people. We'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going to turn this back over to Moses. Before I do that, are there any questions? Anybody raise questions? Raise your hand if you have a question. Oh, I see Peter Sampson has a question. Yes, sir.
If you explained about putting an M in front of your name, I missed that.
I did. I explained it. I'll do it again. That seems to be more confusion than it's worth in practice, but let me say it because everybody's in now. There are 4 people in the waiting room. Let me get them in.
Got him.
Okay, 1 person's already there. Somebody else is doing the waiting. Thank you, Moses. In order to identify you on the screen as a member, you should change your screen name to put an M in front of it to show you're a member. If there are 2 people on the screen, each person has a vote. So to make sure we get the people who have 2 votes, put an M2 in front of your name. And that's it, basically. And if you can't get that done, that's not a big deal. But if you can, great. I'll put an M2 in front of me. I'll back up here and we're set. Okay, any further question? Karen or Robbie, you have a question or a thought? Your hand is up. Karen and Robbie Mumford?
Yes.
How do you do the M2?
Okay, a good question. On your particular window on the screen, if you put your cursor in that window, there'll be a little blue 3 dots. So on a blue square showing up. Click on those 3 dots,
Upper right-hand corner.
upper right corner of your screen, and there'll be a place that says rename, and you go there, click on the rename, and your name, to make it easy, hit your home button. It'll go back to the home, and then type the M or the M2 and hit enter, and you should be all right. If you can't do that,
There is no rename on ours, unfortunately.
oh, well, let's take a look again. I have it on you, so I'll just do it for you. Here, I'll go rename you. Home.
I think I can speak to that. This is Ted Davis.
Yes, Ted.
I'm on my iPad, and to change my name, I had to click on participants and then click on my own name, which gave a drop-down menu, which includes rename.
Okay, that works with iPads. Okay, great. Very good.
All right, very good. So
I'll
we
turn
are
it-
going, yeah, okay, you got Cindy in there. Okay, so real quickly then, I just want to establish the overview of what we're gonna, when we get to the debate section of this, there's fundamentally 6 things that we need to remember when it comes to it. We need to do this in the interest of time, so we may have to limit debate. We can actually have a vote on that. It takes 2/3 majority, and so it's usually recommended 1 to 2 minutes of speaking per person. The chair recognizes each speaker. Everyone can speak, but those who haven't spoken get to speak first. We alternate pro-con. We establish a queue. We ask that you stick to the subject. It must relate to the action of the motion, to the action, to the motion going on. 5, to discuss issues and not personalities. That's the whole basis of why we have these little structures here. They call it criticizing an opponent's reasoning is different than criticizing the opponent personally. And 6, formalities that avoid personalities. So you speak as though you're talking to me, the chair. Mr. Chair, the previous speaker misstated a fact or had a fact incorrect. Mr. Speaker, can the work group member offer more information on X or Y? That sort of thing. So that way I can facilitate it and work with it. So those 6 points are going to be part of how we're going to ongoing education on how we're going to use parliamentary rules to make these meetings more efficient. And I'm off my time frame. So let's get going on the board and committee reports then. As chair, there has, boy, there's been a lot going on, mostly about SRV, the Safe Rest Village. I must use this public opportunity to be able to thank my co-chairs that pulled this off, that brought everybody together in a spirit of consensus and of neighborhood, and to work in the work group. There were 15, and that would be Frank Rudloff, our land use chair, former president of the chair of the M&A, and Peter Sampson. So gentlemen, thank you for your service to the neighborhood. I do have, we have a list of 15 unpaid volunteers from this neighborhood representing a wide variety of locations and interests and perspectives. And I've been very impressed with the work that they have done. And their report will be, they will give a full report here shortly. So I do want to mention that. Also, I want to tip my hat to Corinne, who will not be here tonight, I don't think. I'm pretty sure she's not going to be able to make it. Our transportation chair, who pulled off an amazingly successful event with Solve last week in cleaning up the neighborhood. We had over 40 volunteers meet in front of the Loaves and Fishes building and spread out amongst our neighborhood, specifically to go clean and pick up and participate in Solve. So that was impressive. That was just darn impressive. And Peter, I know you also worked on that a little bit. So thank you on that. But Corinne and Rosella also helped coordinate that. So hats off to them. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much for your time. Next up would be our vice chair, Beth Omansky. And you are on mute.
Hi.
Beth, there we go.
Hi. Vice Chair, I have nothing to report, but I will have a little thing for under the safety chair, public safety chair.
Perfect. Thank you. Next report is from the treasurer. Tad Davis.
There. The financial report is $123.77 in the general fund account, $362.28 in the community events account, $81.81 in the land use account, for a total of $567.86. That includes two recent $100 donations, one of which was for sign toppers, and the other, the note that I have is for extra participants, but I'm not sure what that means. There was also a $2.48 charge by PayPal to receive those deposits. As I said, one of these $100 deposits was for sign toppers. What I don't see in the report that I received from Sweeney is that $100 has gone out again as that donation for sign toppers. I'm not sure what needed to happen there, but it hasn't happened.
The Chris Lyons is working on the grant to and is he'll let us know when he needs that money, our contribution. And also that other $100 I think is meant to offset the increased cost of Zoom when we go over 100 members. So that was the logic behind that contribution, I believe.
Great.
Well, good. Thank you, Dad.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, let's get into committee reports then. Frank, you are up next. Frank Rudloff is our land use chair.
Okay, well, there's not a whole lot to report. There's going to be a meeting on May 17th at 6 p.m. For the Canby Street project. And that will be a Zoom meeting. And I think that'll be, if it isn't already, it'll be posted on the website if you want to attend that meeting, just for an update on that project status.
It is posted
Okay.
in the main
Thank
thing.
you. Thank you. There have been actually, I have no report on the West Portland Town Center, although I'm sure I feel sure there's something happening there, but I have not received any notifications and I'm not aware of anything happening. The other thing to report we did get a notification for a major alteration of a residential, of a house. A substantial addition is going to be made to a house on Caldew Street, west of 35th, so between Gabriel Park and 35th. And that, when you do a major alteration, you're required to notify people. It's allowed by right. It's not anything that one can challenge, but you're notified about it as a neighborhood land use chair. And then a project about which we were not notified, but came to be aware of this last week indirectly through the report of another neighbor, is a project on Southwest 24th between Multnomah Boulevard and Barber Boulevard, across the street from the Fred Meyer gas station. There's a new 17-unit development being built on a site that is now within an E-zone, but at the time of permitting was not. And so anyway, it's a 75 by 75 foot lot that is going to be very densely developed, and it's allowed by right within the zone there along Barber where it sits, but it will have impacts. I mean, even this morning I drove by it on my way to work, and there are two giant dumpsters on the street that make getting through there tricky. And notification about projects like that would be nice, if even if it's not required. And really, that's all I have to say for the land use.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you for that. Let's move on then to transportation, and Corinne, who can never be duplicated. I will just briefly talk about that Solve event and work there. Also, her and I had a conversation just today in regards to the trash that is accumulated underneath the underpass. And I think that it was brought up, we both realized that maybe the reason the city is not paying attention to that garbage is because it's an ODOT issue. And so she is reaching out to her ODOT contacts to follow up on this and to see if we can go that route to get that stuff picked up in a much more expedient time period than it is right now. I know there's been a lot of focus on that. My God, it's right there when you drive into the village off of the freeway. But so we're trying to, we're working on that, folks. We're working on that to see if we can resolve that one. Next up, public safety with Beth Omansky. Again. And you're on mute. Oh, I'm sorry, Beth. We're at public safety right now, Beth.
And again, *6 to unmute.
Sorry about that. I was having trouble with the phone. Anyway, I just have a short report. I wanted to tell people in case they don't know or if they forgot that if you need help changing your smoke detector batteries, the fire department will do that for you at no charge. You just call their non-emergency number and they will come out pretty quickly. I had that done last week and they came out right away. And you have to have the batteries, but they will do the rest. That's my report for tonight.
Very good, Beth. Very good. Next up, I know that and I do want to, well, actually, no, let me go to next up to equity. Actually, before I go into equity, I do want to acknowledge Patrick Brunel. I just want to make sure I'm on the same, I just want to acknowledge, if we were having face-to-face meetings, I would have recognized you immediately. Yeah. But we don't have these face-to-face
Here I am.
meetings. I know it. As soon as I saw you on the Zoom call a moment ago, sir, it's like, oh gosh, that's Patrick.
Brunette, you might.
Yeah, it's brunette.
A brunette, pardon me. But
That's okay.
I'm trying to be contrite here from our email exchange as far as all
I
that.
appreciate it, and there's no need. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Patrick, and we'll certainly be in touch.
So, great.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go over to Will and equity now. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think the equity report will be also fairly brief. We have a written report in the meeting materials for this meeting, so you can take a look at it, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things in there. First of all, we've been working with a definition of equity, which is what we use as a neighborhood equity lens, which is, we talk in terms of having a neighborhood that is open, fair, welcoming, and safe. Now, some people call it, there are other terms, but open, fair, welcoming, safe neighborhood will be an equitable neighborhood. And we use that to check all of our activities. And it's a continuing thing because we think we're doing it and we're not. But there are a couple of things I want to highlight. One has to do with the West Portland Town Center plan. Actually, it had come up for a vote before the Planning and Sustainability Commission of the city, and it looked like they were going to vote some amendments to the plan, which would undercut the equity parts, getting low-income housing in the area fixed up, and international market and other things. Those amendments were defeated. The plan was going to the city council unaltered. So if you're so minded to put a good word in for the West Portland Town Center plan, it sounds fairly minor, but it's a huge event. This is potentially a major development along the light rail line when it comes in. And typically what's happened with those is the low income people get displaced for the market rate fancy houses gentrification. This project is committed to not having that happen and protecting the people who are living in the area, many of whom are refugees and immigrants and who can stay there. So it's a big equity issue, and kudos to the West Portland Town Center Planning and Sustainability Commission for doing that. Otherwise, equity goes on. We are a place, we are committed to doing things, and we are moving as a neighborhood to make that commitment into our action in everything we do. So keep it up. You're doing great.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate that. And you have 2 minutes, sir. Oh, actually, Peter, I have, he has,
Yeah.
go ahead and ask your question, and he
Yeah.
he has 2 minutes after that to give his communication report.
A question for Will. You said put in a good word at the city council. Is it that just go to the city council and say, I support this, or what?
Put a good word into city council. Say it
Yeah.
again.
Well, how does one do that?
I can write a letter to the commissioners. You can testify at meetings where the budget comes up and the plan comes up. You can buttonhole your commissioner, your councilman.
The
and so
usual,
forth. The usual. Put the
usual
word out.
channels.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And they don't mind being talked about, especially when it's something complimentary.
Very good. Okay, we have 2 minutes for you to give a summary of communications, please.
You're going to do communications?
Sure, please. Go ahead.
Very
Take-
briefly, there's a person who's not in the meeting here tonight who is really Carolyn Devine, who is a communications expert, is working on improving the communications of the organization. That means cutting out bulletins. It means getting a website that makes sense. It means reaching people who aren't usually reached, which is an equity issue. People who are rent, people who don't have computers. And there'll be more about that as we improve our communications. I would welcome, and she would welcome, if anyone who has a concern about communications in Multnomah Neighborhood Association, send an email to me. You can do it mnaequity@sweeney.org and say, how about this or how about that? And we will pledge to get back to you and if possible, take good action. And so stay tuned for better communications from the neighborhood. That's it.
I'll have to admit, Will, I included the communications because I am very excited about what you're doing there and what we're doing there with Carolyn's help. I'm sorry, folks, with my coffee machine in the background. You guys drive me to drink coffee. As I was saying, I'm very excited about it because quite honestly, I got an email from the Pearl Neighborhood Association and it looked just fantastic. And they have a solid look and feel and theme and verbiage, and it's, it just looks really good. And I'd like us to get to that point too. So that's what we're working towards, and we'll keep you updated on that. And but I do appreciate, let me also take this moment to call out Will for doing yeoman's work and keeping our website fully up to date with everything that's going on with both sides of the issue, acting as a resource for folks, specifically when it came when it came to this SRV. It's just, you've done an amazing job, Will, so thanks. Let's get into this SRV situation right now. That's the next point on the agenda. I'm going to go ahead and just turn this over without any prelude to the co-chairs, Peter Sampson and Frank Rudloff, and let them explain the who, what, when, where, and why. So Peter, Frank, you gentlemen are up.
Yeah, thank you, Moses, and thank you for the praise you heaped on us as the meeting opened. We appreciate that. I think Frank is going to lead us off in this conversation. And Moses, let me just clarify: you don't want to mention or the motion that will be coming up later in the agenda.
The motion, The motion that the board made and submitted 7 days in advance was is related directly to the SRV work group's work.
Yeah.
Those of us that have, if you've seen if you were able to get the meeting materials, there's a copy of it right there. But everything that we're talking around is centered around that next step, and that will be the motion. We'll be discussing that after this presentation.
Thank you. Let me just point out that we did submit a written report of our activity in April. It was posted on May 5th, I guess, 6th or 7th, somewhere in there. It's a work in progress as things have been moving quickly. But there were a couple of site visits by our working group members. We went to St. John's Village. We went to the River City Shelter in Vancouver. One important posting this in the last month were the materials from Andy Goebel of All Good Northwest. His program intake packet, which had about 11 or 12, a dozen or so components in that, pledges that participants will have to make or review or discuss as they become to determine that they're eligible or a good fit for the Safe Rest Village. And also a SRV manual, the Multnomah SRV manual, which is 10 pages of policies and protocols, including a code of conduct. So these, if you haven't taken the time to read these over, they will give you a darn good view of how the Safe Rest Village will be operated by All Good Northwest. Frank went to a meeting with the city that where they presented a site design. And if he feels there's something worthwhile reporting on that, I'll leave that to him. And of course, the biggest step for us was that last Friday, we submitted to the board and to Moses a draft Good Neighbor Agreement. And that'll be the substance of our report coming up in a few minutes. But I think Frank was going to lead us off here with just a brief discussion of what a Good Neighbor Agreement is and what a Good Neighbor Agreement is not. So Frank, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so I wrote a few things down, so I guess I'm just going to read them here. But, I think that, well, the first GNA that I was involved with was, in 2001, when the Lucky Lab came along and was built in Multnomah. And, the GNA has traditionally been used, to set terms for new businesses and for non-conforming use developments in the city. So which were thought to be likely to have a disruptive presence in the neighborhood, and to use a property perhaps as it was not zoned to be used outright. So the intent was often to give the neighbors some comfort and some means to provide direction about how the development operated and was constructed so that they wouldn't be unreasonably impacted by the new use or new development. Elements of GNAs would typically be intended to address noise, unruly behavior of certain clients, traffic issues, parking, cleanliness, trash management, odors, everything that affects the senses generally would be addressed by GNAs. The SRV GNA that has been developed by the working group, addresses these same kinds of issues, but also specific, items of specific concern related to the nature of the SRV operation, attempting to protect individuals who are participants at the SRV, who are working on improving themselves inside the SRV, as well as protecting the interests of the neighbors outside the SRV, which we all know includes school children that the the West Hills Christian School nearby. A great deal of effort, as we, all the members of the working group know, certainly went into crafting the GNA, and it's let's see, that is not solely focused on how the city built and county operated, contracted to All Good Northwest, how that facility will minimize impacts on neighbors. But we've also attempted to address, how the citizens of Multnomah Neighborhood Association can be good neighbors to the SRV participants as well. So in other words, the working group has tried not to simply take a defensive posture, but to lay out a positive strategy in the SRV GNA that we've created. So this, the SRV, the GNA that we've created also is also in alignment with the work that a citywide ad hoc group, not just a very informal group of folks who from neighborhood associations across the city where SRVs are proposed and are in process of being developed. The first one opens this Friday, supposedly at 2300 NATO Park, Southwest NATO. And anyway, our GNA aligns, effectively with the one developed by that citywide group as well. So, in the course of our work, one of the exercises we did was to develop a list and come up with ideas about what a GNA is and what it is not. And so I just think it would be useful for folks to keep in mind, that a GNA is a lot of things, but it's not other things. So but from our list, we identified that a GNA is, one, a way to express community concerns, give neighbors a voice. Two, it's a clarification or a wish list of expectations, roles, and responsibilities of all the parties involved. It's an agreement, and it's a means of communication. Some of us said that it's an expression of neighborliness and an intention to cooperate and to help. It's a tool for meeting neighbors and building community. And it certainly has been that for all the members of the working group. It's a living document. I mean, we can't regard this GNA, we're going to put it out there, but it's not like anything else. It will have a life, and we'll have to refine it. We'll probably revisit it on a number of occasions as we go forward. It's something to fall back on if something goes wrong. And it's a document that protects the neighborhood. What it isn't, it's not, as it stands, it's not a contract. It's not a way to prevent the shelter from happening. It's also not a tool for the neighborhood to explicitly manage the operator, the provider of the services. And I think the last thing it is it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to answer every question, and it's not going to address every issue, but it goes a long way in that direction. So there you go. That's my introduction.
Great. Thank you, Frank. I want to move next to a description of the process we went through, and then we will turn it over to the three people who did really the lion's share of the work crafting the Good Neighbor Agreement. So for our decision making, we used a process aimed at achieving consensus. Consensus is a term most people are familiar with, but they have only a vague understanding of it and have rarely actually used it for decision making. Here's the system we used. When a proposition came before the working group, each member of the group had a range of 4 sentiments to select from. We expressed our sentiments by raising fingers. One finger signified enthusiastic support for the proposition on the table. Two fingers equaled general support, but with some concerns. Three fingers meant general opposition, but I see the merits of the proposition and I'll accept the consensus of the group. Four fingers was strong opposition and a deal breaker for me. So in order to achieve consensus, there must be no four fingers at the table, no four fingers in the room. 1, 2s, and 3s all were agreeing that they could live with the consensus of the group. So if there were four fingers, then it's time to invent creative options and to settle on a solution that was acceptable to all. This is one of the reasons that consensus is not a fast or efficient method of decision-making, but in an ideal consensus, everyone feels that their voice has been heard. Everyone feels that they have given up something, and no one thinks it's perfect, but everyone can live with it. So I'm about to turn it over to the three people that we ended up calling the draft horses. That nickname emerged because the members who volunteered tackled the craft of the task of crafting our GNA. Those people were Chris Dirth, Shameen Yasilita, Kevin Davis, and they started with 3 GNA drafts from the dozen or so that the working group collected and reviewed from other neighborhood associations. They scrutinized these drafts line by line and merged with the best or most important provisions into a single draft, the one posted on the website. So we'll let each one of them in turn describe their background, their involvement with as draft horses, the process, and why they support the draft we're presenting this evening. And then they'll be back when we get to the Q&A segment a little later in the program. This is a beautiful watercolor from one of Robin's favorite horsey books when she was a girl. And here are our 3 draft horses. It's not clear whether the person behind the plow is Moses or Peter or Frank, but this was a nice symbol for the work that the amazing work that these people did on our behalf. So if I may, I'd like to turn it over to Chris, and he'll tell us about his role in crafting this GNA with Shameen and Kevin. Frank, I'm sorry. Chris.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, everybody. My name's Chris Dirth, and I've had the privilege of living in Multnomah with my family for 30 years. And I was happy to serve on the committee that Peter described and work with a dozen or more of my friends and neighbors here. And I'm happy to say that we came up with an agreement that we were all pleased to sign on to. And I'm going to be very brief about what I see as the importance of this draft agreement. To me, the most important aspects of this agreement are, as we state up front, an expression of commitment by the parties to work collaboratively for the successful and safe operation of the village, the Safe Rest Village, based on the premise of a shared humanity. I think that sets the tenor for how we would like this to be viewed. We approach this task with humility and a willingness to compromise to meet that goal. And I will say, I compliment all of my fellow committee members for making extraordinary compromises from positions that we all started out from. I think the specifics of each party's commitments outlined here are clear, so I won't go into detail, and I'll let others talk about specifics that they think are important. But I would like to point your attention to particularly Section 6H, which details a mediation and arbitration process to resolve differences among the parties. And we sincerely hope avoid legal conflict in the courts. We hope we won't ever have to use this mediation process, but it's there just in case. It's fair to say that none of us are entirely happy with every clause, every sentence in this document, but it's a balanced compromise among widely divergent viewpoints. And nevertheless, we think it's a very workable compromise. I'm proud of this agreement and would be pleased to represent it in negotiations with the other parties, particularly the city. But that said, this proposed draft is not an ultimatum or an unyielding demand. It's simply a starting point for negotiations in good faith with the other parties. I would strongly oppose any attempts to amend this compromise document or dictate a hard negotiating position before discussions with the city even begin. I'd be happy to answer questions later on in the meeting. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris. Charmaine or Kevin, who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charmaine Yeshilada, and I live in Multnomah Village with my husband and 3 young children. I also work in the village. My background is architecture, and I am in the affordable housing, traditional and alternative shelter field within architecture. I also have a long history of volunteer work in this realm and some lobbying experience. So that is why I volunteered to be on this committee. First, I'd like to thank my fellow committee members and the M&A board for their tireless work and commitment to developing this GNA and the commitment to the consensus decision-making process. We all came from differing viewpoints and experiences, some polar opposite views, but we committed to acting in good faith. And I think we finished the process with a greater respect for each other. So imagine if we could replicate that at the city level. Maybe a little too hopeful, but we'll see. I'd like to point out 2 items in the GNA that we were able to compromise on using some creative solutions. The first is about security, which was a very important concern for everyone. The elements relating to security in this document are for the benefit of neighbors and participants in the Safe Rest Village. We wanted to look beyond an increased armed police presence and recognize the patrols may be triggering for those who have had negative experiences with law enforcement. Additionally, the Portland Police Bureau has already developed and trained teams for non-emergency unarmed response. We included references to the now citywide Portland Street Response Team and the Behavioral Health Unit within the Police Bureau. In these sections, we are asking the Police Bureau to bring a plan to address safety with community involvement to create an equitable, evidence-based, and successful safety plan. I was inspired by a conversation I had several years ago with our local patrol officer about neighborhood safety. He said that neighborhood watches work because, and he emphasized this part, the community is actively involved. The next item is about ongoing conflict resolution. The GNA would establish a neighborhood advisory group made up of Multnomah Village volunteers and 3 participants and/or staff from the Safe Rest Village. This group will meet monthly for the first year of the SRV's operations at the very least. And so this provides a framework for implementing the collaborative approach that we've outlined in the GNA's introduction preamble. It holds us accountable to each other and recognizes that the goals and concerns of the neighborhood are shared by the operator and participants of the SRV. Trust is hard to earn, takes a long time to get, and is very easy and fast to lose. The Neighborhood Advisory Group commits the parties to building and maintaining that trust and accountability. I strongly support the motion to start negotiations with the city, county, and operator with this Good Neighbor Agreement. And welcome questions later when we get there. Thanks.
Thank you, Charmaine. And next up is Kevin Davis. Kevin, are you there?
I am here. I got dropped for a few minutes, but through the miracle of Airbnb Wi-Fi, I found my way back in. So,
Would you turn on your camera? Could we see your lovely face?
Let's see here. You can see my face. I don't know about the rest of it.
There we go. You're there.
So I wrote up a statement this afternoon. I didn't have the ambition to commit it to memory, so I could pretend I was speaking off the cuff. So I'll read my statement, and like the other draft horses and the rest of the working group, would be happy to entertain questions at some point later on. So producing a draft GNA from several different source documents was a difficult and sometimes intense and somewhat contentious process. And fortunately, despite great differences of opinion among the working group members, everyone was willing to listen and consider opposing points of view. Besides a lot of goodwill, a common thread was love of our neighborhood, and that helped us get past a lot of tough sticking points. We produced what, in my opinion, is a very good draft GNA. It is by no means perfect. It's not what any of us probably individually would have drafted, but in my opinion, it satisfies all the major requirements. I'm not a big fan of the SRV. In fact, I'm not really a fan at all, but I could readily accept the SRV if it came on the terms that are described in this draft. My primary concern throughout was the potential of the impact of the SRV on those people who live in close proximity to the Sears property. A near second was concern for the West Hills Christian School and its students. They've been very good neighbors to us. Before the working group process began, a survey of my neighborhood produced a list of must-have provisions, and those provisions remain front and center throughout the working group discussions. Examples include a no camping zone much larger than the mayor's 150 feet, criminal background checks for admission to the SRV, a term limit, and legal enforceability. All these things and a lot more are included in this draft, and I thank the members of the working group for including them. Now, let's be clear. Nobody really expects the city to sign on to this agreement exactly as it is written. Nevertheless, I think it's important to present it to the city and be willing to discuss it with them, if in fact they will discuss it. For me, there is not a lot for us to give, but there is at least some room for negotiations. For example, a no camping zone is essential, but maybe 900 feet from the Sears boundary is enough instead of 1,000 feet. Criminal background checks are essential, but maybe a 5-year look back instead of a 7-year look back is enough. Perhaps there are ways to streamline the legal enforceability provisions. Perhaps there's some horse trading that could be done, a little more of one item for a little less of another. The point is, there are things we could discuss without giving away the farm. If the city insists on a weak and unenforceable agreement, I will be the first in line to oppose having the MNA approve it. In my opinion, a weak and unenforceable GNA is worse than none at all. I recommend that the board's motion be passed. In fact, I enthusiastically support it. The negotiating team should be instructed to play hardball, but be willing to talk. If what comes back to us is missing key components, the MNA members should reject it then, rather than assume a bad outcome now. I'm willing to wait and see and give negotiations at least a chance. Long odds can sometimes be overcome. Just ask the owners of Derby winner Rich Strike. End of comment.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so let me explain. The consensus process was not easy for us. And in the end, there were some people who were strongly opposed to the prevailing consensus. The resolution for us was that those people would be able to write a minority statement that would become a part of the body of the agreement. And I wanted to ask Ruth Atkins now if she would explain and speak on behalf of the sentiment represented by those people. Ruth.
Thanks.
Come
Yeah,
in.
thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody. Good evening. Yeah, really briefly, just really appreciate the draft horses and everybody on the work group. So our kind of minority statement, as we call it, is Exhibit D in the draft GNA. It's on page 12, I believe, of your PDF. So without reading through it, you can read it yourself. But basically, a few of us on the committee, while we really appreciate, and we all did compromise and give and take, and exactly as been described, we wanted the GNA to move forward, and we all reached consensus by the process that Peter described. I, for example, moved from my 4 to a 2. But the three of us felt very strongly that the draft that's moving forward, we needed to just go on the record to say that we did still have concerns with the level to which the draft GNA attempts to prescribe for the shelter operator detailed screening and operating protocols that to us is inappropriate, particularly the criminal background checks. And there's reasoning in our statement in Exhibit D about that and why that is not a good practice and not appropriate. So that's the perspective that we wanted to share. We appreciate the opportunity to voice that. But again, as a collective compromise, we support this, and as you know, for the reasons that Kevin stated, feel we need to go forward and negotiate in good faith with the city. And most importantly, our group, and I hope many others are really interested, regardless of what happens with the GNA, that we move forward and work directly with All Good to support the participants in having a great outcome and a successful program in our neighborhood. So thanks so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ruth. We do want to open it up for Q&A right now. Let me, I'm going to do another, just another what this is and what this isn't, the Q&A time. Please remember that tonight we are not voting on the GNA. We're voting on where it goes from here. This Q&A segment should be about enhancing the clarity of items in the Good Neighbor Agreement. It's not a gripe session. It's not for wordsmithing. It's not for telling us your opinion about the GNA. Good clarification questions would start with, what is meant by line 147 on page 8, where it says ... Or how did you arrive at blah, blah, blah? Or help us understand why this became part of the agreement. So please keep your questions comment free and succinct, so we'll be able to entertain as many questions as we can. We will need to move to voting by about 8:10 if we want to stick with our agenda and be done at a time agreeable to all. Moses is going to describe the process for submitting questions, and for most of these questions, they'll go back to the either the draft horses, to Charmaine, Kevin, or Chris, or to Ruth if they're about the minority statement. So Moses, why don't you explain how questions get directed to us, please?
Sure. At the last meeting, it seemed to work very well when people would type their question into the chat, because it helped to establish a queue and it helped to establish documentation of the questions so that we could accurately have it, and then also be able to address it later on if we don't get to the questions. So I would encourage folks, if you have questions for the working group, please type them in to your chat window and send them over to me to me, and I'll get them asked, and I'll identify you and pose them to the work group and to Peter for answering. And then he'll call on the appropriate member, the draft horse or Frank or whomever it would be, to answer that question. And it's 8 o'clock straight up right now. So if you have a question, go ahead and put that into the chat window, and we can go from there. Sorry to make you have to rely on your typing skills to do this, but it just seems to be the most efficient way for us to get as many questions as possible documented. And it, you know, so. Peter, let me ask you this, if I may, while we wait for a question to come in. Was there, talk more about the consensus part of it. How did, that was a theme that you really pushed, wanted to establish early. How do you think that contributed to where we're at right now with GNA?
Well, I'd love to hear from the draft horses on that, or from anyone on the working group. Consensus. So I will tell you that I went to a Quaker college. I did not grow up as a Quaker, but I went to a Quaker college outside Philadelphia where all the decisions were made by consensus. And what that meant is in student plenary sessions, they would go to 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning before we could come to agreement on something. But I was really impressed how this process accommodated all viewpoints, and it's just way more nuanced than a binary up or down vote. And it means everyone is heard and everyone feels like they have been part of the solution. And I see Charmaine has a hand up. Go.
Sure. I think the strength of consensus decision-making is that you are really forced to focus on the shared value. It's a way for people with wildly differing viewpoints to take a really hard look at why they believe what they do, what they care about, and see if there is some common ground there. And in focusing on that shared viewpoint, then it guides us to finding creative solutions that may not have been thought of otherwise when you're looking at majority up or down.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, Kevin's got something to say.
It was that's the first time actually I've participated in that process, and at first I didn't like it all that much, but I pretty quickly came to see the value of it because the 1, 2, 3, 4 voting allowed me to assess the strength of people's feelings about particular issues. And then it gave everybody in the room a potential veto. And so that gave everybody in the room kind of equal power in certain respects, but it also with that came a whole lot of responsibility. You had to really own it if you felt strongly enough to put a kibosh on the direction that everyone else in the room wanted to go, or the vast majority of others in the room wanted to go. So I think it caused people, it certainly caused me to have to examine and re-examine my own thoughts and opinions about certain aspects of things. So I think there's a lot of value in the process. It really requires everybody to go a little bit deeper on an issue.
Chris, I see.
And it worked out.
Yeah, it did. I think we're all proud of that. I know I was thrilled. Chris, what do you got?
Well, what I would add is that this was very time consuming. And what was valuable was taking the time to understand other people's concerns. I went into this very dismissive, I will admit, of other people's concerns about certain things. And over time, talking through them, I understood them better, and I was willing to compromise on things that I never thought that I would compromise on. So just by understanding the wishes and needs of other parties. So it was very time consuming, and but I think we came up with a good result.
Ruth mentioned going from changing her position from a 4 to a 2. And it occurred to me that it would have been in accommodating the people who had objections, we might have prompted someone to go from a 1 to a 2. That and I don't think we saw that in any of our decisions, but But we could easily have seen, assuming that we were successful, is that a convergence around 2s and 3s and fewer 1s and 4s. And you would expect that if this was an exercise where people were expected to compromise and actually felt some reward from having done that. You have any questions for us, Moses?
I certainly do. I've got a bunch here now, so we're going to spend the next few minutes on these. This is from Patrick, and it is, what teeth, quote, quote, teeth, does the GNA have with the city if they reject some or all of the key portions of the document? Note the experience of the International School of Portland, which initially supported the SRV on Nato Parkway, only to rescind due to city's recalcitrance. What recourse do we have if we have a similar experience?
Can I ask our attorney, Dr. Davis? No, Mr. Davis, Esquire.
Well, I mean, the document doesn't give us anything unless the parties sign it. So if the parties sign it, it has some pretty robust enforceability provisions. But if we get stiff-armed, we have maybe outside of the document a little bit of political leverage, but otherwise, we can't force anybody to do anything, and unless the document is signed, and then there are some very specific obligations in it for everybody, and the means to enforce those.
Thanks.
Kevin, I also have another question from you, and this is from Lisa Carney Felton regarding section 4H1.
So Kevin, I got your email and you had said the operator is obligated to provide a staffed phone on site at the SRV 24/7, 365 for taking calls from anyone who has a question or complaint. Then you said that the operator is obligated to investigate every complaint and promptly take corrective action. If the operator is failing or has any of these obligations, the Multnomah Neighborhood Association or the West Hills Christian School can take that to dispute resolution as described in the GNA. So that does not answer my concerns. I'm calling the operator at the SRV at 3 in the morning when there's someone on the sidewalk in front of my house screaming and fighting and doing needle drugs, and they're going to deal with it.
I doubt it. The SRV operator has responsibility for what's going on inside of the boundaries of the SRV. And
so that's what happened last time. So last time, that's the same problem. They said they were responsible for the site and all the problems were on the perimeter right in front of our house. So I'm unclear how the GNA and how all this work is helping us. Can someone speak to that?
Looks like Charmaine is interested in responding.
Yep. So these were the kinds of situations that the safety plan request from the police bureau would be geared towards solving. And certainly that safety plan could involve the SRV operator. At the St. John's Village, we did find that there were a number of incidents that the residents of that village ended up being a form of peer support in resolving issues. Now that's not always appropriate and safe for them either. So that's where, who do we call next? Is that the non-emergency line with the behavioral health unit? Is it Portland Street's response, or is it a significant imminent threat that does require immediate police presence? Those are the issues that I think we have another step that we need to take with significant involvement with the city of Portland to review. And so this GNA is a starting point to have that conversation.
Frank, got a comment?
Yeah, I mean, and Lisa, I think that the section 2, A and B and possibly even C are intended to address that concern in part. I mean, it's one of the reasons for the 1,000-foot, boundary or prohibition of camping, and the statement about enforcing all laws to achieve the prohibitions of subsection A. So those two elements are also part of what's intended to address your concern.
Robin, you're muted right now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was unmuting in order to speak. So the participants in this SRV will have a curfew from 10 at night till 8 or 8:30 in the morning. So they will be inside the SRV during that time. If there's a random camper out there, that could happen right now. But the participants in the village that the village has jurisdiction over won't be out on the street at 3 in the morning. So this is different from the overnight shelter that was present some years ago. The residents inside the SRV are inside.
Thanks. Thank you, Robin. Moses, you have another question for us?
I do have another question, and it's 8:12 right now.
Yeah, we got to move.
The GNA seems to end restrictions on camping, loitering at Moss Street. What about the parking area in front of the CenturyLink building on 28th of Troy?
Kevin, you talked with CenturyLink. What was your conversation with them?
Well, I think Moses is asking about a different CenturyLink building than that we were earlier referring to. This is up on the hill, sort of up on the top of the hill.
Right.
CenturyLink was very concerned about parking on 25th on the piece that is still covered in the GNA. People should know that there was some mighty hot debate over the parking restriction that was at various points in the process much broader than wound up in the final draft. I won't go into all the painful details of that, but we wound up with a parking restriction in a fairly limited area in close proximity to the SRV location itself, because that's kind of a target area for drug activity. And it's also of great concern to CenturyLink, which owns property on both sides of 25th there. And they were very concerned about long-term parking that would interfere with their access of big trucks in and out of their property.
And close to the
Further out beyond that, there was a whole range of reasons not to go there. So.
Frank, once more, and then I'd like to get one more question in.
Yeah, just for reference, the 1,000-foot perimeter extends beyond that point too. So that property is within the 1,000-foot prohibition of camping.
Great, thank you.
Very good.
Let's
Let's do a couple more. One from Tom Pryke, I believe. A follow. If the city starts up the SRV prior to signing the GNA, what leverage does Multnomah Village have?
Sorry, what's the first part of that question again? If
the city starts up the SRV prior to signing the GNA, what leverage do we have?
Yeah.
The leverage we have is probably more, with the Fourth Estate. I mean, with the press and calling the city out and doing it in conjunction with every other neighborhood association who's affected by an SRV in the city. If the city is a bad actor, we can't really control that. And if the county is a bad actor, we can't control that. All we can control is that we're a good actor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. I just to have this here from Bill Southworth. Having been involved in a lot of consensus building over the years, I take my hats off to the GNA that this group has produced, and I have lots of hats. General question about GNA in term of enforceability. Have they typically been the nature of a gentleman's agreement? Is the enforceability section of this GNA rare or unique?
Kevin, can you speak to that or? Yeah.
Well, apparently it's rare, if not unique, but so no one has yet shown me a statute that says it's impermissible. And one of the great beefs about every GNA that I've ever heard of is that the parties ignore the so-called obligations with impunity. And this one is different in that regard. It has some teeth in it, and that's one of the provisions that that I think personally, and many of my neighbors have told me is essential to them. And we'll see what the city has to say about it, and the joint office has to say about it.
Very good.
Yeah.
I need to entertain an emotion to extend the time on the agenda for this discussion from 8:15 to. Do we want to extend this Q&A for another 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or do we want to just?
About 8:30 to 8:30.
Okay, very good. I entertain a motion to extend it till 8:30.
That's
So
13
moved.
minutes.
Second.
Is there any objection to that?
No.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, folks.
Yeah.
It's unanimous. Jeff Parker, I know you have your hand up, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do we know if, is it an open campus there at SRV? Will they be able to bring friends in and hang out with them and during their hours, or is it closed to just the residents?
Let me just ask, it looks like Charmaine's hand is still up and she could respond to that, but have you read through the operator's manual, Jeff?
No, I haven't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are pages and pages and pages.
Okay.
Yes, and I would refer you to that, but
But I think the long story.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. They can have, people can have guests.
Okay. All right.
But they are regulated, the visits.
And those guests are not overnight guests.
No. No overnight guests.
Okay, good.
Anyone else? Sandy?
I see Sandy's hand up, and Sandy is also a member of the work group. Go ahead, Sandy.
You're on mute.
All right. I just wanted to say that in addition to an extremely rigorous code of conduct, there is also the approach to working with people is to build a community. And so the focus is on helping people to connect with each other, not just because they're told to do so or there are a lot of rules, but because there's an expectation of people helping each other and also helping the SRV as a whole to succeed. So what we saw, for example, at St. John's Village was when there was, I actually only heard about one incident they've had because they actually have developed a really good relationship with the neighborhood as a whole. But when there was somebody who was high, was out on the street playing his music too loud, it was the residents who went and got him and de-escalated the situation because it was, they believe it's in their best interest to be good neighbors. And that is very much the mantra of Andy Goebel, who's the head of All Good Northwest, is that GNA or no GNA, his commitment is to being a good neighbor to Multnomah, and that is part of what will be encouraged in all of the participants in the program. So it's not simply a matter of rules, and it's very different from the shelter that was there prior, which was a congregate shelter where people just came on a nightly basis and then were bussed in and out during the day. It's a very, very different model of creating change and transition for people. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you for that. Let's see here.
Charmaine.
Yes, go ahead, Charmaine.
In answer to what recourse do we have? I think we have a lot more opportunity to collaborate with All Good Northwest, because they are going to be operating right there, dealing with the neighborhood every single day. And Andy Goebel has so far shown a lot of openness to collaborating, communicating, working through some of our concerns. And then as for the city, I think what we can encourage is that you guys want this to work, don't you? You want this to be a solution. And in doing so, do you want this to be replicable? Well, if it is, then they're going to need to start working with the neighborhoods. So it's more, I think, from my viewpoint, getting them to see the benefit of it.
Moses, got another question?
Yes, Lisa has a question here. City has currently a 150-foot buffer for no camping. When can we expect that they will change that ordinance to our requested 1,000-foot buffer?
Frank, you're chuckling. Would you want to share?
I don't, that's kind of a question that's, I feel like Lisa's being rhetorical, because I don't know that anyone can answer that exactly, but we would seek to get them to change that as quickly as we possibly could.
Before it opens?
That'd be best, but that's hard to say when they are planning to open the 2,300 NATO shelter on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And is the buffer changed down there?
No.
Just one more quick question, Frank. The recent article about the employees at the All Good Northwest and maybe the whole working group, you got them fighting to unionize. They're getting needle sticks. Their working conditions are bad. We all seem to be rallying in all our support around this airplane that's being assembled midair. And I'm just wondering the group's confidence in that group with their experience and the publicized problems they're having. Can anyone speak to that?
I think Robin can. Robin?
Yeah, I'm there. First off, that question really isn't a question about the Good Neighbor Agreement and about agreeing to send it to the city so that we can negotiate with the city about it. And second, there's a lot of circumstances around the troubles that have happened in the Old Town Village. It's a tough neighborhood. There's a lot of things going on down there that are not going on in Multnomah Village. It's a very, very different situation. But that question really has nothing to do with what we're actually talking about right now. Thank you.
Melissa, you had your hand up. Melissa, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just sort of checking in. I've been trying to track the 1,000 emails a day on this, and I have zero support for it. I've lived here my whole life. I've owned my home for 23 years, 2 blocks from there. And I'm trying to figure out what we do, because 90% of what you guys are talking about doesn't apply to anything I care about as a neighbor. And so I get that we need this agreement for something, and it's this big, ordeal that we're all supposed to buy into it because it's the only thing we can grasp onto. I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking, how is it not something in Multnomah? Like, it's not what it is in Multnomah Village, but you put 60 people and have friends over with zero or little barrier of entry, and we have 45-minute police response time, and people are actually, what are we supposed to do if we don't support any of this at all and don't have time to track thousands of emails and watch as people play around on Zoom for 2 hours? I want to know better options. I appreciate the hard work, but everyone I know from all facets of politics don't want this at all. And I get that there's a bunch of, but like, what do we do? Like, I feel like I've listened to 90% of this. I have no idea what to do except wait and wait and wait to vote on something I don't believe is going to help. Or if it is, it's going to help in a way that doesn't matter. So what do we do? Like, does anyone have a separate, email me, because I don't have time to ever do this again. And this is exactly why I don't get on these. But I am tired of the placating of this. This 60 people with mental health and addiction problems with friends over next to a bunch of my friends' homes that I've known my entire life, some for 4 generations, none of it's going to work. None of it's going to help. We don't have enough services.
Okay, do you have a question, Melissa?
I
Yeah,
do.
Melissa,
I have a
please,
question as to what do we
please.
do if 90% of what's being said in our neighborhood association doesn't seem to feed into, like, the only thing I have is email FEMA. We haven't even talked about that on here. So I understand that this is a trajectory meeting about something, but it's so confusing to try to figure out how to be an activist in your neighborhood for what you believe in. My kids are 4th generation. I don't want a single person here. I don't want this to happen. I don't believe it should for 20 reasons, but there's nothing for us to do. And there's nobody helping us to understand other than to sit through these meetings where we don't know. And you guys have to realize, like, when I have a bunch of my people on here, they're laughing, they're
Melissa,
confused.
thank you. Thank
What
you
do we
for your
do?
comments.
Melissa, I
Sure.
agree. Okay,
Thank you.
so
I mean, it's just,
I
it's
appreciate,
absolutely,
Melissa, I
you
have
have to
allowed
be,
you to go ahead and vent, and that's appropriate.
yeah, but you have to be
But-
neck deep in this, or it doesn't mean anything to all of the community, and they don't know how to be involved, and they don't know how to have an opinion if they haven't watched and read thousands of emails and pages. And I just think there should be other options. There should be
hear
other
you.
ways.
I hear you, but we are doing the best that we can, given the current circumstances, given the structure of the neighborhood association and its relationship with the city. If we were not here, the neighborhood association wasn't here, we wouldn't have any say so in what happens.
I almost disagree. I almost think that having a
that's
group
just
of
the way
people,
I
Melissa, thank you.
I don't know. It's fine. This is why I don't come on here. I mean, this is people thinking that it's not going to be it's going to somehow be different here than it is. And every person I know who lives near one of these is selling their home. I
All
mean,
right,
this
Melissa,
is just,
thank you. Melissa, I'm going to cut
forget
this
it.
off.
It's
We
not
have
worth it.
time.
What a waste
Okay, well,
of 2 hours.
thank you very much for your
Absolute
to make
waste.
comments. All right, thank you. All right, so let's move on. It's 8:28. We have 2 minutes before 8:30. And at 8:30, we're moving over to the board motion on this. And I apologize, and I'm sorry that we have to work through these things, but it is what it is. Frank, you have your hand up, and then Arvind, you have yours.
Well, I just wanted to say, partly in response to Melissa's point, is that what we're voting on is not whether we support an SRV being developed in this location. Because the city has said it's going to be there, and we've followed courses to challenge that. And there's no reasonable response that we've received to that. So this GNA is developed, in large part, because the city is not saying it's not going to happen. They're not, but we're just trying to accepting that it is going to occur. We're going to be prepared for it as best we can. So that's, it's not a statement of support of an SRV, because I think, like Kevin, I wouldn't be in favor of having an SRV in my backyard ever. And, and it's not that I'm not sure about whether I support the concept of SRVs or not. But I do recognize that there is a crisis of houselessness, and it needs to be addressed somehow. And if our commissioners have voted to make it so, we need to hold them accountable to making it a condition that we can live with.
Very good. Okay, actually, we are at the bottom at 8:30. And I do want to move forward. Arvind,
I raised my hand, Moses. Can I finish mine? I raised my hand. I've been waiting here for my Arvind here.
yes, go ahead and ask your question, and but quickly, please.
Okay, quickly. So, with so many opponents to this, why is the Multnomah Neighborhood Association still being a supporter to the SRV when there are so many opponents to this?
Well, we are not in support of it. Our membership is not voted in support or against it. We are working our membership in our February meeting made a motion that we work and create with stakeholders to create a good neighbor agreement with the city and work in that process. So everything that we have done since February in the development of this work group and the actions that they have taken, there are hundreds, literally hundreds of hours researching and understanding this process of the homelessness issue and how it's affecting Portland and the examples of the villages citywide and the contracts that the service agreements that were entered in all of them. And, you know, in interviews with other stakeholders and other schools and principals and such, it's amazing the work they have done. And from that, they have produced what we are about to have a vote on. And that is the motion to be able to whether to go forward with this process or not. Once again, this is not a vote on the GNA up or down. This is a vote on whether or not we go forward or not. Because if we don't go forward, I fear the worst. I fear that we're going to have no say in anything that occurs at that village. And that's untenable. So, you know, as the neighborhood association, that's the whole reason we have taken this route. You know, and folks can come on and say that they're disgruntled with the situation, but we have done exactly what we have to do as a responsibility as a neighborhood association. And, you know,
as a neighbor in this Multnomah village, I don't think we have done what we should have done as a neighbor. I live in a neighborhood. Driving my kid to school every morning, I don't want to have to deal with, should I run over somebody or worry about them when I drive them to school? Should I have to worry about walking with feces when I'm picking up groceries? No, we've not. No,
Moses, I
we've
move
not
the
done
previous question.
You know, I'm sorry. I think the challenge here is that what we're talking about here is the symptoms of the overall problem, and
we're talking about the problem. We're talking about the problem, not the symptoms.
Moses, I move the previous question.
Oh, so is there a second to that?
A second.
Actually, no, pardon me, Chris, pardon me, folks. We don't have a motion yet, so there's nothing to be able to call, but it is a good break in the opportunity of our discussion to move forward into new business. Sir, Arvind, I thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Moses.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for using the excuse of a motion to not address the problem.
Okay, you're welcome to your opinion, sir. All righty, so now we're moving forward here with the new business section. That we have finished the presentation section of the SRV. We have had we've had the Q&A. So I'm moving to the new business section of the agenda. The board has made a motion that was made 7 days in advance and was posted on the website in the common Google folder, the public folder. And I will read that to you as it stands. The motion made by the board is that we move that I'm being reminded that we need to do credentialing, but we will do that after we go forward with this. We can do it simultaneously. We move that the M&A general membership accept the work group, the SRV work group draft of the Good Neighbor Agreement as the starting point for negotiations with the city of Portland, and authorize the M&A board to create a team to enter into negotiations with the city of Portland, JOHS, and Multnomah County, with the task of drafting the version of the GNA to be brought back for final approval by the M&A membership. So that is the motion that the board has brought to the floor. As the board bringing that to the floor, I get to speak first to it. We will have a queue of folks pro and con. If you'd like to have that discussion, please raise your hand if you would like to make a comment on the motion during this time, and then we'll put you in the queue. The board, after reviewing the final report in the GNA as it stood, felt that this was the most practical first step, to take this information and to be able to go into the city with it. And this motion will take their work and start the tough work of the negotiation. And the board can't do that by itself. It's not appropriate for the board to do that by itself, but it does have to have an option to have a team to do that. And so the motion addresses that issue as well. And we do recommend it as a board, having brought it up, that this pass and that you vote in favor. So starting out then, I show two hands. First off, I show Patrick Brunette, and then with Kevin Davis in the queue.
Okay, thanks. We've moved and seconded it, and so we're in the discussion period at this point.
It doesn't require a second because it was a board motion.
Okay.
But yes, and so we're now in the discussion stage of it. And were you speaking pro or con for the motion, sir?
Well, I wanted to, it can be as a friendly addendum or amendment or just a comment. And that is it possible to leave the section 5 out of the version that is submitted to the city? The document is a strong Exhibit D. Sorry, I misspoke. Exhibit D, the minority statement. The document is a very strong document. It's a complete document without it. Exhibit D is more of an addendum, and I think serves its purpose, which informs the membership of the Multnomah Neighborhood Association, but does little to strengthen our position with the city. And in fact, it weakens our negotiating position, having that minority position in the document, because it creates a sense of lack of unanimity or even lack of consensus within the neighborhood. And we're going to need as much clout as we can. This is a David and Goliath situation, us being David, and the city basically doing what it wants. And I think it strengthens the document to not have Exhibit D.
Wonderful. Thank you for your comments, Patrick. I'm going, next up would be Robin in the queue. And then with Justin after that. Actually, yes, go ahead.
The minority statement will remain as Exhibit D when it goes to the city.
Okay, I'm going to assume that's a motion, that's a comment in favor of the motion. Not necessarily, so. Next up, thank you for that. Justin, you are up, sir.
Can you hear me?
I can. Are you speaking in favor or against, sir?
I'm okay with moving forward because we've got to figure out how to make this work. And I'm just throw out a simple comment is we have surrounding businesses. We have multifamily projects there that are owned by small families, individuals, not big REITs. And this is going to have a huge adverse effect upon them and the clientele they're going to attract, as well as the residential homes in that area going down in value.
I hear you, Justin. And please keep your comment germane to the motion that is being made. And that
I just would like to see some of that in there to be addressed, because it seems like we should be doing something for those people.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. Next up on the queue, we have Chris.
Yeah, I want to speak in favor of the motion, and because the sooner we pass this and then authorize somebody or several somebodies to negotiate with the city, we can move forward. If we don't pass this, we are dead in the water. There have been a lot of people who've put a lot of time into trying to find a compromise here. Part of that compromise, I will add, is the addendum D, the minority statement. If we exclude that, I think the consensus falls apart. And so I urge a yes vote on this and authorize representatives to go negotiate with the city and take it from there.
Thank you for that, Chris. Ruth, are you speaking, we've had 2 in a row then of against, or in favor, pardon me, of the motion, or you would be the second one in a row. Is there anyone else that would like to speak against this? I will allow Ruth to make her comment because she's also a member of the working group, and then as long as it's, is your comment pro or against, for or against? Ruth?
Yeah, and it's 4, thanks. And just to say again, that the neighborhood is not unanimously against this Safe Rest Village. And so it's important that, I don't think there's any secret to the city about that. And so we need to move forward and negotiate and reach a good neighbor agreement, and then just I'll move on.
Thank you very much for that comment. I show a hand for Karen and Robbie. Go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I just want to say that I believe that this G&A is a good one. The reason why it's a good one is because it should be kept intact. It shouldn't be negotiated away. It shouldn't be watered down. It shouldn't lose any of the teeth that's in it right now. Was just watching earlier today the group over on NATO, this NATO stakeholders, and there was a lot of issues going on. Commissioner Dan Ryan got on board. They asked him questions, and he talked and talked and never answered. They asked him again. He didn't answer. He deferred to Andy Goebel, and it was all around background checks, and Andy Goebel skirted the issue.
Robbie,
they are still in negotiations with them, even though today Dan Ryan said he wasn't going to submit to any of their parameters either.
Robbie, your comments are out of order because they're not germane to the motion. The motion.
Well, I was saying the motion, I don't believe should be compromised. I like it, and it should stick with it. I hope that's okay to say.
I appreciate that. That's a very valid comment and very appropriate.
I'm sorry if I spoke out of turn there, Moses.
Of course.
I'm still learning the process as as we spoke earlier.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't see any more hands raised. So I think we shall go to the vote. Arvind, are you speaking in pro or con, in favor of the motion or against the motion? We didn't.
I'm sorry if I am asking out of turn. Can you confirm once again what the impacts of being pro or against this motion would be?
Of course. What we're talking about here, and I'll say this one more time for everybody's knowledge before we go to the vote section. What we are doing here is we are voting to approve a motion, a board-made motion that states the following. We move that the general membership, the M&A general membership, accept the SRV work group draft of the Good Neighbor Agreement as the starting point for negotiations with the City of Portland, and authorize the board, the M&A board, to create a team to enter into negotiations with the City of Portland, JOHS, and Multnomah County with the task of drafting the version of the GNA to be brought back for final approval by the M&A membership. So a yes vote, if you're in favor of this motion, you would be voting yes when we vote. If you're against it, you would be voting no. And so
let me ask. So if the GNA that was as published on the website, if I say yes, would that mean I approve that the GNA, we approve it? Or if I say no, would it mean they're open to negotiation?
If you say no, you would not approve us taking the next steps to take that draft and use it as our starting point with the city. To enter into negotiations.
So let me repeat my question. If I say yes, would that mean that we have a hard stand on the GNA?
No, it would be our starting point for the negotiations. There may be any changes, though, to the GNA would be brought that came up during the negotiations would be brought back to the neighborhood association membership for final approval. So
what would happen? What would happen if the city says no to GNA?
You can't do what ifs.
If the city says no to the GNA.
Moses,
Well,
comment?
yes, please.
Okay, basically, we're talking about how firmly do we stay with this motion? And I'm hearing people instructing the negotiators to stay firm, do not compromise, and make a strong stand. The motion, whatever comes out of these negotiations, will come back to the membership for approval or voting it down. That would be the point. It's saying we will or will not accept what has been negotiated. And we can certainly go in with a strong stand that these are vital to the neighborhood and we want them to be in, regardless of what the city might say in opposition. That's not part of the motion, but that's part of instructions to the people who negotiate the motion. And I think it's appropriate to make those instructions. Okay, motion is independent. We are stuck with a situation where we don't have a say in whether the SRV takes place, and we haven't found a legal means or other means to stop it. And that's where we are. Rather than divide the neighborhood into pro and con SRV, we have to have a united neighborhood to make the best of reality on the ground today, like it or not. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so here, right now we have a motion. There's a question on the floor of this motion. And that as I read before, that the motion that we move the membership accept the work group draft, I as the starting point for the negotiations with the city of Portland, and authorize the M&A board to create a team to enter into the negotiations with the city of Portland, JOHS, and Multnomah County with the task of drafting the version of the GNA to be brought back for the final
Would
approval.
you like me to put that on the screen motion? I can put it on the screen in text.
Very good. Go for it, please.
Okay.
So, having ended debate,
So Moses, I've had my hand up. I just have a quick question. Who's going to be negotiating with the city?
that will be determined and be more, as it is right now, it would be just me and the board. That's why this will allow me to create a team of folks that have vested interest. My first inclination is to have the workhorse or the draft horse members ask them to participate.
Have approval by the Multnomah Neighborhood Association.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Is there?
So now that's what we're seeing there is in that screen share is the motion that we are voting on.
Okay.
So
is that interest going to be in the interest of all of us living around SRV, or is that interest the M&A that in the interest of the city?
I'm not sure how to answer that, sir, and it's not appropriate right now because the question has been called and we're about to have a vote. So you can state your opinion in that vote if you're unsure, sir.
Moses, we have not credentialed the members to make a vote yet.
Okay, well then let's hurry up and do it, please. Let's hurry up and start that process, please.
Okay. So let me ask again. So is the interest going to be interest of neighbors of the SRV?
Sir, you're speaking out of order, sir. Sir, you're speaking out of order, please. We have to follow a procedure here. It's 8:49. We have 10 minutes to finish this vote.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate
the
that. Thank you very much.
Of our neighbors.
Okay, so credentialing, please go forward with that, Will. Will. Where'd you go, Will?
Okay, what we're going to do is do a credentialing, which means determining who is a member eligible to vote. And that will come on as a poll, which I will launch. And when you look at it, you will have a choice of whether you have, yes, there's one member on the login. Yes, there are two members on the login. And yes, there are three or more members on this login. Or you're not a member or not sure. Those last aren't really important. If you are a member, say yes. And with that, how many people are on this login? Because we'll have to have a second round for the second person on the login, okay? So you're ready to, here comes the poll. Okay,
We're going, guys. Wonderful, wonderful. We have over 50 people credentialing right now out of 67.
great.
Excellent. Good job, folks. All right, so we're at 55 right now.
Hello, Moses. Hello, Moses. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Moses. This is Jeffrey Hom at Joycelyn Neeme. We're on just logged on by phone, but no video. And so we have 2 votes, but I just want to see how we can vote just by phone alone without the Zoom
We'll
feature.
come back and make sure that you are in there.
Thank you.
Two, Beth here.
You got it, Beth.
Okay. We're waiting for a few more. There are 57 out of the 62 possible voters out of 61 coming up. 57 out of 61. Moses, you want to do a countdown to end the session at this point?
Yes, we'll start that countdown at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
All right, ending the poll. Okay, what we have found here, there are 57 people participated. 33 of them had 1 member on the poll. 16 had 2 members of the poll, and no one had more than 2 people. So we have 33 initially,
After sitting through this?
16
That's all right.
later on. So that comes up to a total of 49 members eligible to vote on the motion. Now, here's what happens. These names are being registered as eligible members
I'm sorry.
to vote. Eligible to
I
vote.
do need somebody to mute, please. We can hear your conversation in the background. Somebody please mute yourself. I'm not sure who it is. You're talking about how long this meeting is lasting. Thank you, folks.
Okay, so let me
I have
repeat.
I have just a procedural question. I didn't see a poll pop up, but I selected the green check mark on my iPad. Does that count?
It would not, but you didn't see the poll pop up on your iPad.
I did not.
Okay, so your name is?
Judy Miller Key.
Yeah.
Judy Miller.
Yeah.
Is one eligible voter. Okay, so we come to the vote on the motion. We'll come back to you and register your vote.
Okay,
Is
wonderful.
there anyone else who is eligible to be a member that was not able to take part in the poll?
Okay, very good. All right, so let's hurry
Beth
up.
Omansky's on the phone. I don't think she can take part in the poll, so I'm registering her. Judy Miller and Beth Omansky are members eligible to vote, but they didn't credential themselves. And I'll repeat the numbers and I'll share them with you. There are 33 out of the 57 were 1 member. 16 out of the 57 who voted were 2 members. 33 plus 16 is 49 eligible members. Everyone will see the vote, but only the people who are eligible members will count. So please, if you are not a member, if you're not one of the 47
Credentialed members.
don't vote. Just leave it alone. You'll see the question, just hang in there and we'll go that way. And then rather than take time in the meeting, if there's some question, we'll go back and look at the votes that we got on the motion versus the number of credentialed members and make sure the number of valid votes are done, but not at this moment, okay?
Very good.
Will, did you get Jeff, Hom and Joyce?
I don't know. If they were able to do it, no. If they were able to, yes, but are they the ones that could not do it?
No, I got him there and I marked him with an M2. He's the 510 number there.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Did he participate in the credentialing?
No, I added his M2 to it, and we'll have to call on him like we do with Beth and the other phone number, if that,
Okay,
any phone number.
very
Okay.
good. Okay,
All
so
right.
we're stopped at this point, okay?
All righty, so we are ready to vote. We have
Okay.
established the credentials, we've established the motion. It's gonna go straight to the vote.
Okay.
All those in favor of the
Wait,
motion?
wait,
All-
hold on. Before we do it, we have to pull up the poll. It'll tell you what's happening, but let me get the poll ready to go. Okay,
All right. All those in favor of the motion, please vote aye via the process of raising your hand.
yes. No, this is not to do it. You're doing it on a ballot, Moses. I'm sorry.
Oh, pardon me. Oh, shit. Shoot. Sorry, guys. Wait.
Okay, we're ready to launch the poll. You will see a motion which says my vote on motion 3, single choice, is yes or no, abstain or not eligible. Second member will have a choice. The first one being doesn't apply. There's only one member, but you have to put something for the second member part for it to count. So most people will vote the first one and say doesn't apply on the second member. If there is a second member, one of those 16, then you say whether you're yes, no, or abstain. Okay? Okay, here we go. They're launching the poll now.
Okay, if you are in favor of the motion, please vote yes. If you are against the motion, please vote no. And if you wish to abstain your vote, you may do that as well. And if you're not eligible to vote, you can still vote, but you have to say that you're not eligible to vote.
This is a lot quicker.
A lot quicker. I'm going to leave this open for 30 more seconds. I'll do the same with you. There's a clock within the poll. It's at 42, 45. Give it 15 more seconds for you to put your vote in.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Go ahead while we're waiting. Got 10,
Uh,
10 seconds.
If this doesn't work, what's the next step? I mean, I'm born and raised here, and I've been in real estate for 30 years with the city of Portland, and they don't want to play. What do we do next?
I'll work on that, sir. I do want to, let me please report the finding of the poll, the results of the poll, the vote, and go from there, and then I'll come back and address your question. And it's right now we have, I'm seeing currently 48.
Can you help me find where the
Moses, are
hands
you,
are?
Moses, are you going to also ask for those people voting just with the phone only as well too?
Yes, Will. Hey, Will.
The poll. Can we end the poll now?
Yes, please.
Can you show me remind me where the hand is? How I can vote? I forget.
Well, if you're looking for your hand, it should be, and there's a.
I want to vote yes,
Oh,
but I don't
no,
remember where the
not your-
icon is.
Okay, you don't have it. There should be a place on your screen saying reaction. Okay, click on that and there should be a icon.
Okay, okay,
You got it?
okay. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You got it, no problem. Okay, we have ended the vote. I'll share the results and read them out.
Wait,
No,
the
wait,
phone,
you have-
the phone
wait.
voters, the phone
voters, yes,
voters.
the other. Okay, let's go the others. Okay, want to name them off? I want Judy Miller. How do you vote?
I actually was able to, the poll did pop up for me this time, so I voted in the poll.
Oh,
Okay.
good, wonderful, Judy.
Beth Omansky, how did you vote?
Yes.
Okay. And Jeff Hahn, how did you two vote?
2 for yes.
Okay, yes, yes, yes. Okay. Now we have an anomaly here, and I'm not sure exactly what to do, but the results are pretty clear, as you'll be seeing. I share the results. We have 4 more yeses to be added to the results, and here are the results. Overwhelmingly applied, yes. The problem being only 33 logins qualified as members, and we have 44 single votes that's considerable overvote. Now, We'll have to check and see who was eligible and who was not, but I think the results are pretty clear. The motion passed overwhelmingly.
Very good. And I think we can certainly ascertain from that. So the motion has passed and is, your chair will take the necessary next steps to implement the ideas behind the motion. I want to point out right now, and I want to thank you very much, everyone, for being here for all of this. It is 9:01. We've gone a half hour behind our specified time. So that's where we stand right now. Is there any?
Move to adjourn.
Hey, Moses, this is Mike. I had a quick question about, is there a time?
There's a
Is there a
motion,
time?
sir.
There is a motion that was just made by a member. That is a motion to adjourn. There is no debate on this, and it can be approved or denied with a majority vote. So on the
Motion was on the floor, though.
A motion has been on the floor.
I
Motion number
understand,
2,
but,
yeah.
but the motion that was to adjourn,
Mhm.
it takes precedence
last week.
over any
Mhm.
activity. And so any
Well,
motion
my
that was on the
motion
floor, we
was
have to protect
already
it further.
there before the motion to adjourn was. My motion was already on the floor before the
understand that.
motion to adjourn.
These are very confusing motions coming up, and I think a lot of people have not really gotten a full, true story of what's going on in this.
I understand that, but here's the challenge, and this has been done very appropriately. At 9 o'clock, the final time that we have extended this debate to, which is our second hour, the ending of our second hour of this, a motion was made after that first motion passed to adjourn. In Robert's Rules of Order, a motion to adjourn takes precedent over any debate or any discussion that is on the floor. And so, and there's no debate to the motion, and it passes or is denied by a majority vote. And so any business that was being dealt with at the time of that motion, your motion, Robbie and Karen, has to be carried over to next week or to the next month, to our next meeting. Now, there's pros and
That was
cons.
stated to us last time when you tabled one, and it would never came up ever again.
We need to, tabling a motion needs to be brought back up by the original person that made the motion.
And we
So
discussed
when
that.
in next month, when we do this, we will be bringing two of your motions, one is on the floor and one has been tabled. Both of those can come up and be discussed. What we can do, this does work. The positive of this is that this gives our membership another month for both of your measures, so that they can be motions, so that they can go forward. But we have a motion to adjourn. It's 9:04 right now. A motion to adjourn has been made. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. We can do it by voice.
Aye.
All against, say nay.
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 The ayes have, I hear you. The ayes have that, and this meeting is adjourned. I also, Karen, Robbie, I will call you tomorrow morning and we will go forward with this. I promise you that, okay? But we've adjourned the meeting, and I thank everyone very much for participating tonight. We've done good work.